Thanks for taking the time to take the What Type of Challenge You and Your Board Are Facing assessment. So let's now find out a little bit about your results, shall we? Hi, again, my name is Mark Buzan, in case you didn't already know, founder of the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors and president of our Executive Director Association Management Services. And over the past 5 years, I've literally interviewed hundreds of board directors as well as experts in the fields of nonprofit and association excellence in search of how volunteers like yourself can make a real impact without their board role burning them out. I've noticed one big issue coming up time and time again. People would say to me, Mark, I'm passionate about the mission of the organization and want to offer my expertise and input, but sometimes it's just so difficult or confusing to know just how we as a board can get our organization unstuck, not knowing exactly what is the right path for us to go forward to get us to where we want to be. Sometimes the challenge can be one of the four following difficulties. First, as times have changed for nonprofits and associations, so have the reasons for why so many have started. Boards find themselves wondering how they can define the role for the organization to be more relevant and impactful. They may have had in their heyday a time when members and supporters just naturally flocked around them, coming to their events, but over time, the engagement has simply dropped. Sometimes they feel just stuck, facing apathy, or just the general environment around them is making it difficult for the organization to make the impact on society, government policy, or with stakeholders board members had envisioned. They're not really sure how they could define the right role for the organization that will set out a unique path for it given the lack of progress they may be experiencing. And as board members and staff live and breathe the mission, they're frustrated when they can't seem to understand why or how members or supporters aren't necessarily engaging with the organization as they really would hope. They ask the executive director to put out a survey, and if at best they get responses back, but the ones that they do receive don't always give them necessarily the information they really need to appropriately measure satisfaction with the organization's services. And this leaves them wondering, well, what more can we really do? Adding to the last point, where the role of the board is to counsel staff and propose strategies, and in the case of volunteer only organizations, to convey an important message to government, members, stakeholders, or society in general, they're frustrated by not knowing exactly how to communicate their message. In fact, with social media, events, media, direct outreach, or all sorts, and there are many other ways to get the message out, and many are left asking, Mark, we've tried that measure or this measure or that, and it didn't really work. How do we choose which method is best that won't burn out our finances, burn out our staff, or burn out the board itself, which is made up of volunteers after all? Revenue, sometimes membership, despite the best efforts of the board, are declining, and if they're not declining, they're stagnating, or sometimes they're caught off guard, not really knowing what to do. Now, the most dedicated and committed board members confide in me, and rightly so, that if you're not growing, you're dying. Even the average board member might just be throwing up their hands in the air and saying, well, what can we really even do about that? And if any of these situations have your head nodding in agreement, saying, yeah, I can relate to that, keep watching as I'll get into each of these in a moment. Each of these challenges mean that either the organization's plans are never fully realized and opportunities for growth are missed. This makes it especially difficult to retain and recruit really motivated people to leadership roles on the board who lose faith that if they put in their hard work, they'll either be left to do it alone, or they won't be able to see the fruits, frankly, of their efforts. And this is a discouraging prospect, especially for people who seek out board roles as a means of their own sense of self-fulfillment. Moreover, the most dedicated board members confide in me their frustration that if it weren't for them and or another board member or members along with them, the decisions and strategies for the nonprofit just simply wouldn't advance. And what's more, They fear that if they were to ever leave or finish their term there on with the organization would simply be just left without a consistent means of assuring that things would just get done. And in my numerous discussions with nonprofit board members, they also worry that in order for real progress on their mission to occur, there needs to be a long-term and sustained effort to see things through, yet the organization doesn't, the people, the finances, the structures in place, the organizational turn and stamina really isn't there necessarily to make things happen where they would like to go. And when you combine all of the uncertainty of what exactly is the right course and strategy to take, as someone who's spoken with hundreds of board directors and consulted numerous boards of nonprofits and associations of all sizes, causes, industries, these dedicated volunteers on boards tell me that from one meeting to the next, there just never seems to be enough real progress made. This only complicates the challenges further for their nonprofit leaders, as many come to the board with spurts of abilities and energies to help get things done, only to have them burn out later, thereby further creating a disjointed sense of what strategy should look like on the board or for the betterment of a long-term view on success. And when you take a step back, you can begin to see how this becomes a disincentive for attracting and holding on to the most talented of board directors, as it becomes challenging for the organization to maintain a steady course. They confide in me that within their busy career, family, and volunteer commitments, they know that things could be better, but they're not really even sure about what can be done to keep their meetings from ineffectively dragging on, or how they can accomplish more without their board role becoming a second job, dragging them down into the weeds of administrative tasks and operations, instead of it feeling like you're being part of making a big difference. And that led me down the path of creating this assessment and tutorial so you can get instant clarity about the knowledge that you need and what's right for you as well. So with that, let's get to your results, shall we? Okay, looking at your results, you're probably what's known as a mission-based type of professional. For mission-based individuals like yourself, it's all about your big why. There's something that you want to achieve in the world, either with a cause, your profession, or with your industry, and for you, board service is just one way to accomplish that. You're likely the type of person who has a strong desire to make a positive impact in the world. Now, there are other mission-based professionals who have taken this very same assessment and who are changing the world by volunteering their leadership skills on the boards of charities, foundations, co-ops, and associations everywhere, such as members of the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors. They have learned from each other exactly just how much more effective and rewarding their experience can be when their board has figured out how they can make certain they've identified the right strategy for their nonprofit association or charity. They've learned strategically to choose the path that can get all the board on board with that and motivates staff and excites the organization's supporters towards more engagement, greater membership retention, and measurable acceptance, as well as adoption of the organization's desired message it wants to communicate. All the while, the board finds itself refocusing the efforts of board members on the interests that drove them to volunteer in the first place. A passion for strategy to advance the cause and mission that interests them the most. Now, if you had the benefit of enough free time to take a university-grade courses, the Council of Expert Corporate Strategic Management Consultants, lawyers, sometimes thousands of dollars to undertake high-end training from the highest paid consultants, you could probably have the highest performing board with ironclad strategies in place to get you to where you want to go. But my sense is that if you already had many of those answers and resources to your biggest challenges, you likely wouldn't be watching this video now, would you? If you're like most people who volunteer their free time on a board of directors, you can appreciate the frustration, the confusion, or even the sense of helplessness that comes with when you feel like you've tried everything and yet you're still stuck. After all, between your other commitments, there's only so many hours to go around in your day, and in the time that you do commit to board service, you want to see how, if at all possible, you and your board members are, well, actually making any kind of difference or accomplishing something. If any of what you've heard causes you to have you nodding your head, keep listening. However, before we can talk about why and your board may be stuck, we need to mention the importance of strategic plans and nonprofits and the very importance of strategic planning itself. You see, at the heart of it, strategic plans are the foundation of how a nonprofit performs. Those with a written strategic plan tend to hold their leadership accountable for the performance. And those boards who understand their role in developing strategy are also the ones that are more likely to produce long-term sustained impact that motivates and encourages current and prospective board directors to make a commitment and stick to it. Now, sadly, a lack of understanding of strategy is not limited to small nonprofits, according to even Forbes nonprofits. More than half of those who do have plans noted that their plans are not reviewed or checked at least quarterly. So even those organizations who have a plan may not actually be using the plan to make adjustments or stay the course during the course of the year. Now, this only increases the chance that the organization will go adrift and fail to meet its objectives. In considering how boards need to consider strategic thinking, there are basically three kinds of considerations and strategy that board members must contemplate when it comes to actually implementing their plans and designs. Developing the right strategy with the right set of around what we call future-oriented thinking, internal and external considerations, making sure that the right amount of consideration is given at board meetings are all part of that. Now listen, if any of this sounds like a lot to master, or you're thinking, yeah, but how do we put that into play? I know what it's like. You see, it can feel very much incredibly overwhelming to be faced with the sheer number of factors that are out there, and more importantly, how exactly do you direct and develop the resources of the organization, all while proposing realistic pathways for your board colleagues to consider without coming off as a know-it-all, while still subtly playing your role of guiding the organization towards the right path. What I've found, and what other members of the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors have found, is that when you focus on these core principles as the guiding path for your board discussions, you have a really big advance over boards filled with well-intentioned but uninformed volunteers. Now that you have a bit of an understanding of the importance of a strategic plan, we can now focus on the next important piece that you're undoubtedly here for: diagnosing the source of the challenges themselves that you may be facing. Now, a first place to start from is asking yourself as board members, how do we know what our issues are? As a nonprofit board, you get to answering this question by identifying strategic issues that are critical unknowns that are driving you to embark on a strategic planning process. These issues can be problems, opportunities, market shifts, or anything else that is keeping you awake at night and begging for a solution or a decision at the same time before prescribing solutions to challenges. It's critical, in fact, to take a strategic planning lens to diagnosing the cause of challenges faced by most nonprofits and what are some of the circumstances that necessitate strategic planning. Second, we found that there can be as many as 11 different reasons, yes, 11, specific to your board of directors as to why your organization itself feels stuck. They can include everything from no clear priorities, overcomplexity, ambiguous responsibilities, lack of performance information, well-intentioned but ineffective communication, a real lack of connection with donors or supporters, or over time, your organization has just lost touch with the changing needs of your target membership or donor base. If any of this leaves you wondering what to do or where to go, I get it. Understanding the right path, and most importantly, diagnosing how your board might just not be as effective as it should be, is no simple undertaking. But in the end, a much more rewarding and personally fulfilling experience is possible if you can just diagnose the source of the issue and move past it. After all, you're volunteering your time. You should at least feel like you're getting something out of that experience itself and like you're actually making progress. Mastering the art of moving the ball forward means your board becomes, on average, more aligned with what we at the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors have found to be a larger motivating factor for attracting good board leaders to nonprofits. Moreover, it focuses discussion to be clearer on the discharging of the board's true responsibilities in line with what good governance is really about. For larger organizations with staff, it sets the appropriate roles between staff and the board so that you're not stepping on each other's toes, yet sets policies for the chief executive to implement and achieve. And if you're completely volunteer-driven with no staff, it assures board operations are appropriate and adequate to your means as well. Strategic management and a clear focus on the organization's ability to execute provides a discipline that enables the board and senior management to actually take a step back from the day-to-day business to think about the future of the organization. Without this discipline, the organization can simply become solely consumed with working through the next issue or problem without consideration of the larger problem picture. Focusing on diagnosing the right strategy when resources are limited and refocusing discussion on the most critical issues so that the mission and vision of the organization are coming closer to realization is a principle I've personally installed as an executive director and owner of an association management company. I've seen great success even with nonprofits with limited budgets and a handful of dedicated board members. Getting clear on what the problem is and aligning that in the context of where there's a genuine need for the organization's services is more and more recognized as the path towards a more professional way of how nonprofits can actually make a difference, regardless of whether they're charities, trade associations, or foundations, or for that matter, regardless of whether they're active in issues of health, education, the economy, and many, many other verticals. There's a saying that a problem half defined is a problem half solved. Defining the problem, that sounds simple, doesn't it? However, getting to a solid solution first requires that everyone is clear on the real source of the problem itself. Defining the challenge is the most difficult, actually, and the most important of all the steps. It involves diagnosing the situation so that the focus is on the real problem and not on the symptoms. Far too often, I've seen boards write off this important step, only to find out that they didn't address the heart of the real threat to their organization. Frequently, finding or identifying the problem is more important than the solution itself. Now, it's not possible, nor is it realistic or appropriate for the board to know all of the decisions of the executive director will have and the impact, nor is it really possible nor realistic either or practical for the executive director to know all the motivations of the board itself. If you're volunteer-driven, getting clear on your strategy is all the more important because you need to pick your battles and get all the more sharper as to where you can make a real impact. Strategy provides a vision of the future, confirms the purpose and values of the organization, sets objectives, clarifies threats and opportunities, and determines methods to leverage strengths and mitigate weaknesses at a minimum. And as such, it sets a framework for clear boundaries within which decisions can be made. The cumulative effect of these decisions, which can add up to thousands of dollars over the year, can have a significant impact on the success of the organization. Providing a framework within which the executive director and staff can make these decisions helps them better focus their efforts on those things that will best support the organization's success. Now, do you understand why defining the problem is complicated and half the battle itself? Many a nonprofit effort is doomed from the start because the problem was not properly defined. Okay, at the beginning of the video, I promised to take up your 4 dominant challenges for where your nonprofit board may be getting itself stuck. Now that I've hopefully made the case to you of the importance of defining the problem, here's some of the considerations for you to think about for each of these challenges there. If you're having difficulties determining the right role in place for your organization, I suggest and ask, is your organization still relevant? And if so, why? What is unique about your organization that no other actor can do and is still doing? Can you answer that? And if so, why can you definitely be so confident of that? If the board of directors is challenged by lowering member engagement or members and supporters leaving the organization, what have you been doing to get a clear understanding of the reasons why? Have you been sending out email surveys and expecting that to give you the profound reasons behind dropping numbers that it's going to give you there? Here's a secret yet counterintuitive piece of information you often won't hear. These surveys alone rarely give you the full picture. If you and the board are frustrated by the fact that, try as you may just not be getting enough traction on your advocacy or main awareness of the issues, well, this kind of situation is usually the result of a bigger, deeper set of problems. So before you rush into your next campaign or event, take a step back and think long and hard about what I've spoken about before that could be causing you to lose traction. They're all essential elements in strategic planning and understanding your strategy. Finally, if revenues and membership are declining, have you ever tried to approach the problem from that of perceived return on investment or ROI from the perspective of members, supporters, or donors? Have you asked yourself how much membership organizations can do a better job of communicating the unique offerings that they have while differentiating themselves from their peer organizations and from the internet? And from a strategic point of view, differentiating themselves from peer organizations and the internet is really important. This is where boards need to get clear and objective. Now, I could get into some of these broad topics for the purpose of this video, I just can't get into each of them into depth. These subjects are hours long of discussions, frankly. Members of the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors take up individually in our events and roundtable discussions. But what I can say is that even if you're slightly curious, yet nervous at the same time, on just possibly raising these issues, the best place for someone like you to start from is honest and frank questions. Questions that quietly raise the consciousness of your colleagues around the critical issues of what you're good at and what you're not good at as well, and where you should be adding value as an organization. The next simple and digestible action item you can undertake is to get clear in your mind on identifying what progress on your mission will look like. Knowing whether or not you're actually making progress is a critical element in determining whether or not you're actually moving forward on your strategy. Reviewing the organization's progress towards meeting its strategic and operating plans is a key responsibility of the board. Now, having all this type of clarity can be hugely impactful and helpful in planning out your next board meeting. So now that you're just a bit clearer on the issues around diagnosing the issues of strategy and the leading challenges your board faces and how you can start to address them, well, that's definitely put you in an awesome position. But there's one more mistake that often board members make, and it's at this very step in the process, and frankly it breaks my heart because it can take years to discover this mistake, and during that time it can cost you in so many ways between time, money, and stress. And then of course there's the opportunity costs of wasted efforts you and your board make. You end up hating the experience of burning out when, if you're like most people, what you really want is a great board experience that allows you to make the type of impact that you want to make in the world. Listen, I've studied board members and found that only 42% of them feel that each of their board meetings are a good use of their time and well organized. And it comes down to one big failing. It's a failing that happens so often because most of the conventional wisdom about how nonprofit boards actually make progress from one meeting to the next is just flat wrong. It comes down to the single most important decision your board needs to make, and that decision is not about what or how your next board meeting should be conducted. It's actually where and how your board needs to situate itself in relation to the environment in which it exists. Most people spend all of their time on the components of a meeting agenda or the latest operational details, and almost no time at all on the who and where we are as an organization. But the who and the where are the single most important considerations you need to concentrate on, and you've got to get this part right, because your who and your where are the foundation from which all other things in your nonprofit are built. When I founded the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors, which gathered support from around the world, I realized that the single biggest mistake people were making on a board was that they weren't able to see the forest from the trees on most of the critical elements that would get them out of their biggest challenges, such as declining memberships, revenues, or being listened to by your critical audiences. So I embarked on the single biggest project of my life, interviewing board members from all over while conducting my own research. The combination of that search was outlining for the very first time ever the process for making that single most important consideration boards must make. How to educate and get well-intentioned volunteer board members better focused and more understanding of how to diagnose the leading strategy challenges they face, especially when this isn't their full-time job. It's a side consideration done in their limited free time. And that is the subject of a brand new book by the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors, Setting Your Nonprofit's Course and Strategy. What I want to do right here, right now, today, is because you've taken the time to go through this assessment, is I want to encourage you to learn more about how you can get your copy of this quick reference guide. And the best part of it is that if you click the link below, you'll learn about a special free offer on the next page. We simply just cannot cover everything there is in this subject in this video. So if you've ever felt that there just maybe on your something in your board experience that could be better, but you've been afraid to take the leap and screw up, well, this book is for you. You're going to find out that it's the meticulously tested step-by-step process outlined in this book is easy to follow. You're going to find practical and easy to follow advice that's outlined in the book as well. Now, despite the result of hundreds of interviews and my own experience, this entire process has been designed to minimize your risk of failure and losing time and money up front. And this counterintuitive, unique method, coupled with the practical advice, will give you clarity on how to quickly diagnose the source of your board's problems and get you unstuck. Plus, in addition to this book, I'm also going to hook you up with an additional free book on improving board dynamics, which is also a critical element in improving your governance. Also, because I don't know about you, but if you're like the type of person who likes to listen to in addition to reading as well, I'm going to hook you up as well with the audio version of this book as well. So, all you need to do to take advantage of this special one-time offer is to simply click on the button below of this video on this page below, and you can learn more about the book, the free book about board dynamics, and the audio version. So go ahead, do this just right now. Just click on the button on this page, and I'll see you on the other side in very minutes from this exact moment.